Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this week's video, we are going to take a look at the Polyend Tracker Mini and the Dirtywave M8 and the comparisons between them. If you are looking for a definitive, this is better than that one, this probably isn't the video for you, but if you want to see the comparisons and see which one might be better for your workflow, this hopefully will answer a lot of your questions, and if they don't, please just leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer them as they come. Full disclosure, the Polyend did send me this Tracker Mini, so if something seems a little biased or whatnot, I apologize. I'm trying to be super neutral about it, but I just wanted to let people know so they don't think I have a hidden agenda or something like that. So let's get into it. So the first thing, obviously, as you can see them, is the form factor. The M8 is a lot smaller. Well, I say a lot smaller, but it is smaller, and obviously the screen size is a lot smaller than the Polyend Tracker Mini. From me working on it, I sort of screen-wise and button combination, I do enjoy the Tracker Mini a little bit more. Once you get the flow of the M8, it's really good and you can kind of whip around with the buttons and whatnot. But the screen being a lot smaller, it's not something that I realized until I got the Mini that I would love a larger version of the M8. And I think if they brought out a larger one that had more space and some more features and whatnot, I would be all about it. But at the moment, for size and buttons and everything like that, I'm sort of finding myself leaning more towards the Mini. Also, it's a bit newer, so new toy, sort of using that a little bit more. The next one is the Tracker Mini does not have any synth engines. You have to put in samples or record samples in to make sounds. Whilst the M8, if we go across, and if you've seen any of my videos, they have a collection of synths built into it. So we can we'll go just making a random pattern, and you can see here as we go through, we have a bunch of different synths to use. So you don't need to have samples in it. It comes preloaded with samples, but you don't need to have samples. If you want those synth engines, there is a lot to choose from on the M8, whilst the Tracker Mini is just purely samples, and they're obviously loaded in by you. They come preloaded again with a bunch of their own samples, but there's also the microphone, which we'll talk about later, to get samples into it. One thing that kind of bugs me about the M8 is the Hexadecimal system for numbering things, and I realize that's just the way that the old trackers worked and whatnot. I'm just not a fan of it. I want numbers to go in sequential. I don't want the hexadecimal. The Polyend Tracker Mini does give you the option, so if you're used to that from back in the day of using a tracker, you can put that in and work that way. For me, it's just not, it just doesn't gel, and I kind of have to just kind of ignore it and just flick through the numbers until something sounds good if I'm using it on a filter or something like that. Next thing is tables. Now the M8 has an extra feature, well, an extra function called tables, and it's a way that you can use that to modulate and move and pretty much do a lot of functions on the M8, whilst the Tracker Mini has built-in effects and it doesn't have that tables function. With that said, from my personal experience, I use tables very, very sparingly, and it's definitely the thing that I have had the most difficulty trying to learn and trying to see where I could use it within my music. And with that, I just haven't grasped and I don't utilize it enough, and it feels like sometimes I've got a Ferrari and I'm leaving it in first gear tables. You'll see if you search on YouTube for anything, people are doing amazing things with it, and you can do tables within tables, and you do all this crazy stuff. For me, I just want to make more music, and having to learn this new thing, it's not really happening for me. There's a lot more effects within the M8 as there is the Polyend, but again, more doesn't necessarily mean better. But I've seen some people do some crazy awesome stuff on the M8, which may be a little bit more difficult to do on the Tracker Mini. But for me, the way that I make music and write music on the trackers, I find that I'm very sample based, and the effects that I'm using are very much the ones that you can bring up. You can see here we've got a bunch of effects here, and it's all pretty much stuff that as you would expect on most like basic things on a recording software. The next thing is the layout. Now some people might like this if they've come from a older tracker base, like LSDJ, whatnot. For me, it took a little bit to get my head around. As you can see on the M8, we start at the song page. As we come across, we go to the chain, we go to a phrase, and then we actually go to the instrument. On the Tracker Mini, we get presented straight at the pattern. So we would be, I guess, at the phrase stage on the M8, and we can see all 8 channels or 8 tracks straight away. Whereas the M8, you just see one 16-bar phrase from one instrument. Some people might like that, to kind of dive deeper onto the one part. Some people might like to see everything presented in this one mode where they can see everything going at once. So it's just something you have to think about when you're sort of thinking how your workflow is and how your mind sort of works with that. Piggybacking off that last point, the M8 will only let you see one bar at a time. So if you want to start editing multiple, you have to scroll through each page to get to it. So if we come back up here, and let's go something that has a bit more information in it. So you can see here, this is a 8-bar phrase. We can see one bar, and then as we scroll down, scrolls onto the next one, so on. We can scroll down each of the bits. On the Polyend Tracker Mini, you can set the pattern length. So we can increase that to 128 steps. So as you go down, you can keep going down and you can see each bar. So 16, 32. So that's 2 bars there, downbeat of the 3rd bar, and so on. So you can kind of edit and move around bits on a larger scale as you can on the M8. You can still do it. It's a little bit frustrating when you want to edit multiple bars of information. So if I wanted to go in and we're here, we can't go any further than that. If we wanted to copy and paste 3 bars or 4 bars worth down to the next bit, you have to kind of go out and then copy it here, and then you'd go down and then paste it down here. But for me and my brain, I want to see what I'm copying and pasting rather than going in, seeing the information, going back out again, and then copying those chains. The Polyend kind of has done away with, it doesn't have chains in it. Everything is just presented within the actual pattern. The next thing is the microphone. Now, it might not be a big thing since it's pretty easy to record samples into the M8, but I definitely find that is one of the strengths of the Mini, is just cruising around my room or my house or whatnot, hitting stuff, recording it in, getting a bunch of found sounds, and then kind of making an idea from that. It makes it feel a little bit more playful, and you can kind of get a lot more happy accidents in that way. Whereas on the M8, for me, when I'm loading samples, it has to be a bit more, I have to put a little bit more thought into it and getting those samples in there. I might have some stuff on my phone that I've recorded, found sounds, which are pretty easy to record in and whatnot, but the spontaneous feeling of just being able to hit record using the microphone and then gathering some samples and then making a song with it is something that I really enjoy. And if you've seen any of my videos, I love using found sounds, so having this microphone on there is something that I really, really like. One little point is the battery life. Battery life on the Tracker Mini is up to 8 hours. Obviously it's a bit bigger, so it can hold a bit bigger battery. And battery life on the M8 is 6 hours. With that said, I haven't found myself reaching that I really need to charge during a session or whatnot. I mean, if you're sitting there for longer than 6 hours writing music on there, maybe it's time for a break. Maybe it's time just to charge it up as you go, sort of thing. One little thing that I found with the M8, and I haven't found it with the Polyend, I've had the M8 for a lot longer than the Polyend, obviously, but one thing that I found with the M8 is over time, if the project starts to become too big and I'm using too many samples, I'll start to experience screen ripping where it will glitch out. You can still read the numbers and everything like that, but it kind of glitches out. And then around that time, the whole M8 will need to be, I'll save the project and then I'll need to restart the M8 because it's kind of, personally, I think it's reaching the limits because of the amount of samples I'm using and whatnot. I could be wrong. I'm not the developer or anything of this. It's just from experience, I've found a number of times that I've kind of maxed out the session and I need to restart to kind of give it a little bit more room to breathe. One main thing that I found, the difference between these and the workflow, is that the M8 will require a little bit more menu diving to find bits and pieces. If you saw my last video using the M8 to create a song, I had a couple of times where I couldn't work out where a sound was being stopped or was being played from. And it's a little bit frustrating when you might have these tracks, but then you don't actually know what's playing. Whereas here we can see each of the notes being played on there. We can see what's muted and you can see what the information is. So if you are kind of like me and you maybe coming from more of a traditional sense of like writing music and whatnot, the Tracker Mini might be a little bit better because you can see all the information. While it does look like an Excel spreadsheet on both of them, being able to see all the notes is a little bit more helpful. Whereas in song mode, it's a little bit more difficult. And the same if we come over to song mode, where are we? Song mode, here we can see that we have tracks with information and we've got tracks that are muted, but we might not necessarily know when that sound is going to happen. So again, it's a workflow thing and you just might find it a little bit more comforting if you're not coming from a tracker background, just to see everything to kind of understand what's going on and whatnot. One other thing that really sets the two apart is the buttons. You can see that the Polyend has a lot more dedicated buttons on it. We have obviously everything that's named here, but then we have these buttons across the top that will change as you select different screens. You can see as we go through that they change to suit whichever screen you're on. The M8, the buttons are pretty much set. It's just the button combination between the two really will help define what those buttons are going to do. It comes with a really good little card that will show you all the button combinations and whatnot. It is a lot to learn, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, but once you sort of get the hang of the basics, I find that it's pretty easy to whip around on the M8. And the last thing I want to talk about is which one would be best for you, and that generally is the one that you can get a hold of. M8 is pretty hard to get a hold of. The best way to find out when they're going to be available is to check on their Discord. They're really good community on there. But since the company is pretty much one person, it can be a little bit hard to kind of find that window and get a hold of them. The Polyend Tracker Mini is pretty much available everywhere. Obviously, it's a bigger company and they have the infrastructure to kind of get those shipped out to a lot of places. So at the end of the day, hopefully this has given you a little bit more insight into the two trackers and maybe which one would work best for your workflow. I really enjoy using them both. Obviously at the moment I'm using the Mini a little bit more because it's newer to me and I'm still learning bits and pieces about it. But they're both really good tools for creating music, and yeah, if you find yourself that you want something to travel with, or if you want to just sit on the sofa and kind of make music and whatnot, they're both really good options. So if you have any other questions or anything like that, feel free to leave them below. And until next time, see you later.